Hi, this is Mike McQueen, your friendly teacher librarian, and welcome to Reading on the Run. I'm at the StarFest 2011 conference, science fiction conference, and I have a couple special guests that are going to give you the title of this lesson. So here we go.
Tap into the visual learner
with graphic novels.
All right, so I'm leaving the Denver Marriott Hotel where StarFest is, and I'm going over to the Hilton Express Hotel where Comic Fest is. And Comic Fest is a big collection of comic book and graphic novel people. So before I share with my usual tips, let's first talk about what a graphic novel is. A graphic novel now covers a big, much more wider definition. And it used to be just comic books. That's what typically people think of when they think of graphic novels. But nowadays that term addresses so many different types of materials. And there are graphic novels that cover a whole huge wide variety of types. A lot of educators like to use graphic novels with kids that struggle with reading because quite often kids that struggle with reading may be very visual learners, and graphic novels are very visual in nature. There are a couple things I love about them. First of all, I love the fact that most of them are short, so it doesn't take too long for a struggling reader to get through a graphic novel. The other thing I love about them is that it's a combination between both text and visual information. So a kid that's struggling with the words can easily look at the pictures to find out what's going on, and vice versa. And this is an important skill now. Graphic novels, some kids can pick up on it really well, and some kids need a little guidance, and that's what this video is all about. The other thing to mention too is that in my career I've worked with many struggling readers, and it takes a little delicate touch to be able to introduce them to graphic novels. You can't just throw one at a struggling reader and say, hey, try this will work. You really have to use a little bit of thought involved with how you do it, and that's what these 3 tips are going to do for you. So let's get started. Graphic novels come in all sorts of formats and genres. You can find graphic novels that are humorous. You can find graphic novels that are scary. There's horror. There's suspenseful ones. In nonfiction, you can read graphic novels that will teach you about people, which are biographies. You can learn about events and all sorts of, just about everything you can imagine. And in the past few years, graphic novels have really exploded. They're accepted more often in libraries and in education, and the more that gets published, the more opportunities there are to hook in a struggling reader. Throughout this website, you're going to find a lot more videos and information about graphic novels, so let's just get started with our first of 3 tips.
Tip 1, find the right type of graphic novel.
So when picking a graphic novel, one of the things you should look for is, first of all, make sure that it's appropriate. Some graphic novels are pretty mature in content, so you don't want to give the child something that's a little bit too mature. So that's one thing. Ask a librarian or a bookseller for some tips if you're not sure which ones to get. Another thing to look for is the difficulty level. So graphic novels can come in all levels of difficulty, from easy to read to very hard. Now, if you're working with a struggling reader and you give them something that's too hard, it's going to be frustrating and it won't be a good experience for them.
Tip 2, make sure they know how to read a graphic novel.
The world of graphic novels can be overwhelming. There are so many different types. And before you just hand over a couple graphic novels to a struggling reader, you want to make sure that they know what direction, especially what direction to follow the text. Some graphic novels jump around differently than others, and especially if it's a manga or manga type of graphic novel, which is a Japanese-based graphic novel that reads from the right to the left, from the back of the book to the front of the book. That's a very different style of reading. So, and also too, if it's a fictional graphic novel, whether it's a comic book or a novel, the way that the story reads can be a little tricky in how it jumps around. So you just want to make sure they know how to do it. And the same is true for a nonfiction graphic novel. Nonfiction graphic novels are, I think, a little bit more easier to follow because it's more factual, and a lot of times the sidebars of information or the pop-outs and speech bubbles are pretty self-explanatory, but it's the fictional graphic novels that are really sometimes tricky.
Tip 3, ask them to teach you.
one great technique for struggling readers is to talk to them about stuff that they're reading. And for graphic novels, it's great if you have them try to teach you and explain to you two things. One, how the book is read, like the order and the pattern that the story goes. And number two, what it's about, what the story's about. So it's a great technique to connect with your child or your student.